Hi, Wayne Dorband here for the bi-weekly NTP CEED webinar huddle that we hold here at our Northern Colorado headquarters in Loveland, Colorado, both live here at our site and also going out over the web to those of you that are watching. Enjoy what we have for you today. Today's topic is actually going to be really focused on the people that are sitting with me live here in the room, which are a combination of interns and staff. And the specific topic is going to be, how do you prepare yourself in a better way to get a job in the environmental or ecolonomic, green industry, sustainability, lots of those kinds of words. So we're actually, assuming that Elijah gets back in the system, we're going to put up some resumes that we've got from some people that we've gotten some permissions to use, just for examples. And I'm going to talk about some things that you might do a little differently on your resume. I'm going to talk a little bit about topics like appearance and maybe what's the best way to show up for a job application, and what's the best way to look. Cover letters. What's a good cover letter and what should it say? How do you just improve your chances of getting a good job? So that's going to be our specific topic. I'm going to be looking over at the chat session that I've got. So if you have questions or comments during the webinar, ask them anytime, and do it through the chat that you have. Again, if I had, somebody said, Joe says, Wayne, you look really short. I'm sitting, so I would hope I look a little shorter than I am here. But if you have questions, put them in the chat. I'll either address them while I see them come up, or if it doesn't fit in with what I might be talking about at the time, I'll address them later, but I'll definitely get to them. I'm not sure that we're going to get Elijah in. It looks like we're really having some challenges with that. And if this breaks off, either hang around a little bit, because it'll probably start over again on the internet side, or go over to YouTube, go into the channel that would be Wayne Dorband, and then look for the video that should be up there. It'll probably be the top one that's on, and it's actually streaming on YouTube also. So the topic, how do you get yourself prepared? What's the best way to present yourself for a job situation? So I'm talking to an audience here, and I'm trying to look at them and also look at the screen. So we'll see how both of those work. Let me throw it out to the group here in the room. If you were wanting to get a job right now in a specific area of the environmental, ecological just field, first, where would you look to see if those kinds of jobs, if there were jobs available? Anybody in the room here, or anybody on the chat, where would you go? What would be the first place that you'd think of to go to look to see if there were jobs available? Okay. Somebody said on the internet. By the way, I'll repeat. I don't know whether I've got my headset on, as you can see. I think you might hear people in the room, but so somebody said on the internet. I think that's a good place, but let's be a little more specific. So the internet's a pretty broad. Okay. So how would you find those? Okay. Do a Google search. Use the terms environmental job boards. That would probably give you a start. What else? What's something else you could use on the internet? Now, Elijah's here. So we did see him for a second. Actually, we're seeing him back and forth a little bit. And so Elijah, you're on. So if you could put up your screen again, and why don't you go to the screen we were going to use. We were going to have a screen that was up to start this that would be actually a little introductory slide. I want to put it up there just because I would like to see if you all out there are seeing it, because this is the way we want to start these in the future. I'll see it, Elijah, when it comes up. It'll be on my other screen here. So he's starting up PowerPoint here, so it'll be up in a second. So what's another site? So John said do a search. Put in environmental job boards. What's something a little bit more specific you could go to? You've all used it, by the way. You've probably got your internship here. You were saying something there. USA Jobs. Okay, that's a site. I haven't even heard of that one, but that's out there. Craigslist. Matter of fact, that I will tell you, that's the first place I'd go. I talk to lots of employers, and the first place they post jobs is on Craigslist. And Josh, we post things on how often? We have something all the time for some kind of a internship, jobs, any number of different things of that nature. That's the reason that I would suggest Craigslist first over all those job boards. Those are jobs now. Those get published by somebody who has a job not 2 weeks ago, not something they published a month ago. They're now. And I would say you go on Craigslist and you look at the date. So I wouldn't even look back more than, and I'm going to switch over here for a second. I'm going to keep talking. So with somebody on the screen side that's looking at this on the internet, would you just click in that you're seeing now a slide that says NTP CEED Weekly Huddle, and just let me know by the chat when you see that. So again, would you you should look on Craigslist and look on those posts that are yesterday, or today, and then maybe go back a week ago, but I wouldn't even go back much farther than that. You can look further back, but really go for things immediately. So, and you're right, there's all other ways to search on the internet and find other things. So let's say you did that. So you found a job on Craigslist, local, let's say, or national. By the way, know that on Craigslist, you can look all over the country. So I wouldn't just limit my search. So if you were looking for something on the Front Range, there are 5 different, I think, Craigslist sections. There's Northern Colorado, or I think there's Fort Collins. Josh, you probably remember it better than me. It's Fort Collins, Boulder, Denver, Colorado Springs, and I think Eastern Colorado, and then West Slope. So you probably could cover the whole state. Look at all those, because again, there might be individual different postings in all of those. So now let's say you found a job you liked, you thought was great. What would be your next step? Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Please read what's there and let the next step, if it's told, to be what they tell you to do. And Jim actually said government websites, not a bad idea. I think that's great. And somebody is seeing the slide, so I'm going to switch back to me. And Elijah, why don't you go ahead and put up one of the first resumes on there, so when we're ready, we can have that. What about somebody said read the ad. Make sure, because here's where my point is. If it says send an email, don't be calling them. You want to offend somebody, you want to immediately put a strike against you, maybe 2 strikes against you, do that. If it tells you to apply by email, apply by email, okay? So let's say it says that. And I think that's what most are going to say. So it's asking you for something. It's going to probably either ask for a cover letter and a resume, or it's going to ask for a cover letter alone or a resume alone. Again, do exactly what they ask you to do. If it's not specific, then, let's say it's not specific. What if it just describes in something? Then what would you do? So it doesn't tell you what to do. What do you think you should do? Okay. Keith says he would call them and then get it from there. He'd ask specifically what it is that they would like, and he would handle it that way. That's a great answer. I mean, I think that's a good answer. Anybody have different thoughts than that? Any other ways you might think to handle it? Okay. I actually am going to agree with Keith. If it doesn't say specifically in their post, apply by email only or apply a certain way, as long as there's and even if there's not a phone number there, I'm going to do more research myself, and I'm going to find out the phone number of that place, and I'm probably going to call them, because it didn't tell me in the email, I mean in the Craigslist posting, email only, whatever. Josh, you're right. That's a way that you could do it. But I'm going to be more aggressive, and I'm going to call. But I'm not going to just call boldly and just start saying, "Hi, I'm Wayne, and I'm the right guy for your job." I'm going to do probably what Keith said, which is I'm going to ask whoever answers the phone, and can you put me in touch with whoever's in the hiring area? That's one thing. If you get in a office assistant or a receptionist, and they'll do it. They'll probably, so you're going to get with that person, probably be an assistant, and then just say, you know what, I saw your ad on Craigslist. Are you still looking for, I'd probably ask that question, are you still looking for somebody to fill this position? Let's assume they said yes. How would you like me to get my information to you and to apply for the job? I think that's great. So let's say you did that, and you sent in, let's say they said to send in a resume and a cover letter, and we're going to talk more specifically about what that means here in a bit. What would you do after you've submitted the resume and the cover letter? You've done that, and what are you going to do?
Follow up, verify they received it.
Yeah, you're gonna follow up within a reasonable time, and I don't mean days. I mean the next. If you send it by email, they should have gotten it right away. I'd follow up the same day, and say, very cordially, I sent in my email to you with my cover letter and a resume. I just wanted to verify that you've received it. Here's where you're going to need to start to be a people reader a little bit. First, sort of know whether you talked to the same person. Did you talk to that you talked to before? What was their attitude? Were they being standoffish at all? How did they react to you? And if they reacted positively, let's assume they did, I think I'd end that. I wouldn't just say, did you receive it? I'd say, what would you suggest that I should do next? Ask them, what would you like me to do next? Because I'm very interested in your position. And listen, let them tell you. If they tell you specifically, well, we're going to be looking at all these resumes and we're going to be getting back to the people that we're interested in within a period of days and so on, which is probably what they might do, I would be respectful of that, and I would then note that down. And however many days they told you that there were that process, I would make sure that same day that you got back to them. And again, cordially say, this is Wayne, I'm getting back to you. You told me when I talked with you last week that you were going to be reviewing all these applications, and I was just following up to see if you were still, going to be interviewing, and if I'm on the list, being very cordial about it. Here's the bottom line. I have hired, so I'm going to give little bits and pieces of what I've done and why I have some credibility to do this today. I don't know the number of people, but I've run two companies that one of them had 4,500 employees and the other had 1,000. And the one that had 1,000 I founded. When I started it, it was myself and 3 other people. And for at least the first 2 years, I was involved in some way in every one of the hirings that we did, and we grew from 3 people to over 250 in 3 years. So there were over 200 people in a 3-year period that I was at least some way involved in the hiring in. At the same time, I was a college professor, and I was advising a lot of my graduates and those people that I was counseling and advising of what they should do when they would go out and look for jobs. They'd then share back to me with what they did and what was successful. Here's what happens if you're an employer. When you put out a job description and something, you start getting in the resumes and the information, and it goes in a file. All right, and there's somebody that's assigned to dealing with that, and there's a process. But the reality is, it's not perfect, and it's not ever the way that they necessarily say it's going to be. And quite honestly, what is a big factor of you getting a job is the person who's the most persistent, cordially persistent. I don't mean obnoxiously persistent. You need to be careful about that. But you need to be persistent, and you need to be in front of them in a positive way as often as you can. And if they don't give you specific direction, I'd say you continue to call them back, email them day after day after day until they literally tell you, we're not, we hired someone else. There's not anything in this for you. So please stop bothering us. I mean, literally to that point. Because here's what happens. The person who is in front of them the most in a positive sort of way is going to get way more attention than even the persons that they come in and interview. And you may be the last one that they call in to interview, maybe even after they think they've closed the process, and you'll get in front of them. You really will. So it's important to be in, my head keeps going to in their faces, and then that's sort of a little bit hard way to say it, but you really do need to do that. So that's the way you'd respond to a job that's announced. By the way, that's probably not your best way to get a job. Best way to get a job is don't go out there and look on Craigslist for what is available. Go out there and look on the internet, which you can do now, and do a search for names of companies that are in the area that you want to work in. And you don't even care whether they're looking for employees. Instead, you identify them. You then get in touch with them the same sort of way that we just talked about, that Keith described, and you say, this is Wayne. I have been researching you. I'm just amazed with your company. And you better know a lot about them, by the way. Learn about that company. When you look up their site, find out who their CEO is, as much as you can, their history. The more you know, the better off you are. By the way, same thing in the process that I described. I didn't take you through the rest of it. If you get an interview, you get in front of people, you should know more about that place than you can imagine. And that's a big thing that I see that most people don't do. When you go in for any kind of an interview, you'd better have spent a good amount of time learning about that company and knowing about it. And you can do that today on the internet. It is so easy to figure out about what companies are today. So again, a better way to get a job, however, rather than going to listings, is to find the job that you'd like. Find the company that you'd like to work for. And probably it isn't just one, it's multiples. Then you start the process. You submit your resume. And again, because they don't have us, they're going to probably tell you, well, we've got a whole file of resumes. Don't even listen to that. That isn't even relevant. John is in the room here, and John, you know how many that we would get at a bigger company that I used to run, that John used to work for, literally hundreds. And we'd have files that were 2 feet thick of people's resumes. If your resume came in a year ago, it might as well not even be in the file. If it came in a month ago, it might as well not even in the file. We're not ever going to even look at it. And if we were to have a specific job, you think we're going to look at those resumes that are in there? Not a chance. I don't even care if you might be told that we're going to. But the ones that are at the front, no. More importantly, the ones that are sitting on the HR person's desk, or the CRO, if it's a smaller company's desk, that's absolutely the first ones that we're going to go to. And my experience as an employer, and then as someone who was a teacher of a lot of other people that were getting jobs, that is the way that the vast majority of people end up getting jobs, which is being aggressive and searching for what you want and then putting yourself in front of them. So that's the front end. So now let's get into sort of the next step. And in a second, I'm going to have Elijah, we're going to switch to a screen, and he's already got it up, and we're going to try the whole screen share side of this. And let's assume you've got that. You're getting that resume in front of people, all right? What should it look like? Because quite honestly, the cover letter and the resume are the next thing you're going to get judged on. And if they don't look right, if they've got something about them that are not right, they will get tossed as quickly. I mean, people just won't consider them, right? So before I show you a resume, and we've just sort of randomly picked some out. We actually had some we didn't pick because we were asked not to have some that were up, so we're not doing that. But and they're not intended to be, and matter of fact, I hope that you won't even be able to hardly read them, but I'm going to use a description for you. But so the people's names aren't important. It's more the format of them.
here's the biggest thing I could say. Different kinds of jobs warrant different resumes. Do not have the same resume that you use for every place you apply. You should customize your resume for the specific kind of job that you're going to look for. One of the resumes that we're going to show you today is a guy that came in and talked with me today, earlier today. I had not even ever seen his resume until today. He was one that did just as I said. He did not come in based on a job that we have any kind of a posting out for, even though we have one out there right now. He came in totally by researching our websites and seeing that we looked like a company that he'd like to work with. And he has done a variety of different things in his career to this point, but what he wanted to emphasize to us was his artistic side. He's a designer. And so you're going to see something about his resume that is very different than any other ones that you're going to see. And John was with me, and he's shaking his head in the room. Was that not one of the most artistically well done resumes you've ever seen, John? It was. I mean, it absolutely fit the guy. And if I would have never ever met him, if that would have just come in the mail to me, it would have stood out over anything else I would have looked at, because, and not by the words, not by anything that was on it. It was by its look. So I'm going to show you the first one that we've got up here, and there's a little bit about it, and that you're going to want to look at, which is there is a picture on it. I think in today's world you want to put a picture on your resume. That is absolutely a good thing, and make sure that it's a picture that shows you in a pose that you want to be in, that you think is attractive to an employer. All right, be careful about what you put on it. Do not have it when you're out partying somewhere. Dress appropriately. Even put it in the right setting that you might have it. And again, I wouldn't use the same picture on every resume I submitted. And again, what I wanted to point out on this resume was primarily the picture. Actually, Georgia, who this is for, did a really nice job for a lot of the elements of it. But let me just point out then some other things that are good to have. Absolutely make sure that in the format that you have all of your contact information, your email address, your phone number. I would put a home phone and a cell if you had them both, because you really want to make sure that somebody can reach you in any possible way that is out there. So again, make sure you put, and Georgia did a nice job of it here. Honestly, I would not put my education next. Here's something on a resume that I would say generally don't do. What you want to have at the very first thing, by the way, statistics have shown that people that are looking at a resume, how long do you think that somebody looking at your resume, how long of their attention do you think you have? You're close. Yeah, it's between 30 seconds and a minute. By the way, how long does the statistics say that somebody will look at a website before they decide to go stay on it or go somewhere else? This is an interesting one. 3 seconds. 3 seconds is it. So when you've got a website and you want to get somebody's attention, you got them for 3 seconds. And if they don't like what they see in 3 seconds, they're out of there. That's the tip. Resume's longer. Remember, they're not even looking at your resume unless they decided that they want to. They made a decision to pick it up and look at it, and they knew there were some things about it that they wanted to look at. So I know something about Georgia because I see her. That's the reason the picture's so great today. And because so many resumes are not just live on hard copy, they're also on the internet, people look at pictures and they'd like to know what you look like. And by the way, I would submit both an online resume and a paper copy. You know, don't just send an online resume. Either hand deliver it. That would probably be the best way to do it if you can, or if you can't, I'd mail it. And I would mail it, by the way, in a 8.5 by 11 envelope. Don't fold it up and put it into a little envelope. There's little things. That big envelope is going to be more likely to be not screened out by the the person that gets the mail for the company than a little envelope that might even just get thrown away before they even look at it. All right? It's very unlikely that somebody's just going to throw away. And I'd put a label on it and make sure that it's even got, what looks like a corporate sort of identity to it. And then maybe put resume included and crossed in an angle and so on. But a little bit of, on George's here, I would actually, and again, a little bit of personal preference, but I would put something more catching than just the education to start out with. Again, I'd put something a little bit more about you as a person. As it relates to the job, why is it that you're the best person that I ought to look for this job? That's why it ought to be it ought to be individualized per the job. And then as it relates to experience, does she have a second page of this one, Elijah? Can you go to the second page? Got it, it's up. So she continued on with her jobs and different things that she did. Is that the end of it, or is there another page? Okay. So then she finishes up and she's got volunteer work. Volunteer work, that is really good in today's world. I would make sure you put on your resume anything that you've done that is in a volunteer circumstance. Employers really look at that today, and I think it's important to be on here. And then finally, she ends up with certifications and additional skills. I think that's good, but don't put them on if they're not relevant to the job. Do not put them on. If you're applying for a design job, and one of the things you can do is run a Bobcat, I wouldn't put on there my Bobcat skills. Again, that's just not something that I really, as an employer, want to see. It actually shows me that you just haven't focused on what it is that really we do, and what, again, if that company has Bobcats or whatever, then it's probably relevant that you want to show more diversity of yourself. So look at this last page and tell me one more thing that maybe Georgia should have done on the last page here. Oh yeah, the people in the room aren't able to see it. So if anybody on the internet, we've got a whole bunch of people out there on the internet, what would you do differently? Type it in. What'd you say, Josh?
References.
Yeah, that was not even something that I thought of. Interestingly, that's an interesting one. Let's come back to that. That's not what I was thinking about. The references would be good, but I'll tell you right now, in today's world, references are actually not important as important on a resume. They're very important for the next step. So I would follow up with what if you get an interview. I'm going to come to that. I'm going to go presentation-wise in a little bit, which is that you should submit something after your interview. You should submit a thank you letter for the interview, and in that you would put references, even if you've put them on your resume. But no, there's something else I'd say you should put at the end. I was looking to see if anybody on the internet was going to come in and say, put in your personal information again. Put it on that last page, just like it was on the first page, to where I know how to get a hold of you. And I don't have to flip back to the first page. Put it at the very bottom of your resume, just like a footer would be, which you can do with any one of the word processing programs. Use Microsoft Word or whatever, and put it as a footer so that it's there. And I'd put it on every page of your resume so that if somebody was looking at a 3-page resume like we've got here, that would be there. Resumes are important, but they're not as important as I said resumes, references for a resume as they are as a follow-up. It's not likely somebody's going to check your references before they interview you. They're going to check them later. They're going to check them after that. By the way, if you have good references, if you have people you know will give you a really good word, I would even be more aggressive about them after you've done an interview. I would actually ask those people, whoever you had as references, if they'd be willing to call up on their own whoever it is you're applying, then the potential employer. So I've thrown a lot out there. Let me stop for a second and see if anybody in the room questions about resumes. We're going to show a few more here. Keith. Yeah, I think that's a better way to probably do it. I don't think it hurts to put them on, by the way. But by the way, I don't think you want your resume to be too long. 3 pages probably getting about too long. I think 2 pages, and today, again, front and back, and then the paper you put it on. Put it on heavy, thick paper. Put it on, I mean, what's the big deal of spending a couple bucks for paper that you do for a resume? Do it nice. Any other thoughts in the room or on the internet? Oh, it's absolutely relevant. Meaning it doesn't have to be volunteering for any kind, because employers are looking, is this a person that they're going to judge a little bit? Is that somebody who's willing to probably go above and beyond? Because if you're showing them that you have a volunteer heart, it says you've got a volunteer heart for your job too, quite honestly. So I think anything's relevant. Any kind of volunteer work is relevant. Doesn't matter what the job is. I've got somebody that's coming on the internet who's somebody I know who is an employer, and he's worked with lots of people. So I'm going to read his note to me here. So Norm comes in and says, Wayne, I tend to make decisions to read the resume based on the cover letter, which we're going to get to that in just a second. Great point, Norm. If the cover letter doesn't cut it, the resume doesn't matter. Norm is exactly right. Again, I probably should have even gone to the cover letter first. You know what? I find, and I'm not going to put any up here, but we get a lot of horrible cover letters. What's that? Yeah, you need to do a formal cover letter. You need to have your own letterhead. It is so easy in today's world. Create your own brand, have your own letterhead that you create for yourself. Even give yourself a logo. I mean, maybe it's your picture, and then think that letter through and make it you. I mean, I'm not talking about you having to have the best, the show that you're the perfect English scholar. By the way, make sure that there aren't clerical mistakes, spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes probably, but you should write it in a form that you're comfortable, that really displays you, and it should be relevant to the job. Norm, do you have any other thoughts that you'd throw out related to that? What do you look for in a good cover letter? Jason's come in and says if I ever see an entry-level resume longer than 1 page, I disregard it. Cover letter, resume references 3 pages total. So here's somebody that's an employer, and he says for entry level. Okay, so that's a good point too. Probably the less skilled, the less obviously apparently skilled the job, probably you do want to have something shorter. But the cover letter, boy, and again, I think what should it say? One, it should say, I want this job. I just think that this fits me better than anything. I mean, you don't want to, you do it concisely. That should be no more than a page. Then you'd say a little bit about yourself and what your experience is. And then you end it with, it's kind of the sandwich effect, again, with what is it, why do you think so I want this job, here's a little bit of me, here's what I think I can do for you. You end it with that. That's the last thoughts that you give to them. Any other thoughts on the cover letter? We've got 20 minutes left, I was told. Great, I'm glad. See, look at this, I'm getting coaching from the room. We're actually pretty much done with the sort of specific content. Elijah, do you have a couple other resumes up that we can look at? So this is a contrast, by the way, you see on the screen to the last one that we saw. Starts out with employment and gives the dates. And actually both of these I think did a pretty good job with that. And then goes down to education. And then the print's actually small enough on mine that I'm not reading it. What does it say?
Education.
Okay. You know, bulleted points, and here's the second page of this resume. You know, honestly, this one isn't as good as the last one. I'm just being real honest, and probably it ends with saying thank you for your consideration. Is that right? Is that on that one, or am I pulling that from somewhere else? It doesn't look like it's the. It looks. And he's kind of done it more in a format where, you know, he's got a different kind of a header and a footer. Nothing wrong with that. And he does have his contact information on both pages. Although I'd end it with the contact information, because typical way people read is they top, bottom, then they read the middle. On anything you read, people read top, bottom, middle, top, bottom, middle. And so you want the strength at the top and at the bottom. And, you know, he has got some extracurricular activities. You know, we didn't talk about that. I mean, do employers care about whether you're a climber or a water skier and so on? I don't think it hurts. In a one-page resume, you don't want it in there. If it's for entry level as such, and I would cut that out. So I mean, the references, descriptions, and sort of what you do outside of the job, I would not put those in if you're trying to shorten something up. Volunteer work, I do think, is something you try to get in if you can. People really look at that today. This is the one that I saw earlier today that I was incredibly impressed with, and it for a lot of reasons. So any other questions or thoughts about the resume cover letter side of this? Because then I'm going to go to sort of what you should look like, presentation of yourself a little bit, and follow up. Then we're going to end and go to some questions. You ready for another one? Yeah, unfortunately, these are not coming through. Here's a suggestion. You should somehow, if you can, shut your Skype off when we're doing these. But this one, this unfortunately, it's truncated wrong. So what you're seeing it on the screen is not. Oh, you're able to show it up there now. So now the people in the room are seeing it. So this looks like it's too long. If you put this into an 8.5 by 11, it wouldn't look kind of the way this is. But notice what Will's done here. He's branded himself. Look at his name up there at the top, and notice the little icons that he did with the globe and the car. They're specifically related to what he did, what his job was, and in the design field. There's a lot of really good stuff about this resume that it caught my eye. It doesn't show on the screen anything like what it was live, because and we have the live version of it. We'll show it to you guys here in the room. So let's see the second page. Notice what he does at the end here. This is a little different. But again, another one, he did not put his additional contact information here, so I would have added that. And he had a little bit of room. He didn't have a lot of room, actually, because again, remember, the whole bottom of that is not actually on this resume. That's just the way this is showing. But he put in some relevant accomplishments. Now remember, this is not for an entry-level position. So this guy's been quoted. They've quoted about him in Outside Magazine. You know, if somebody's put a quote specifically about you. He's had, those are all different magazines in which and he's a designer. He worked for North Face for 5 years, and he designed tents for North Face. So these are reviews from magazines of his tent design and different things about him. That's something important. There's a hint for our resumes. We shouldn't have a phone in the room we're learning things as we're doing that here. Presentation. What should you do at that live interview? And should you just show up for an interview, or should you maybe show up other times? Because I didn't say the other one. As long as you're not considered to be annoying, and if it's somewhere local, after you've gone through an interview, I'm going to start showing up at that place on a fairly regular basis. And even if it's just the receptionist seeing me, and again, I'm not going to be rude, and I'm not going to say, you know what, you need to let me go back and see that person no, not that. But you just show up at the reception desk and say, hi, this is Wayne. I applied for a job here last week, and you know, I am really excited. You guys are doing great things, and get to know that receptionist. So I'm going to put John on the line here. John, who's the best person to get to know if you want to sell something to a company?
Person who answers the phone.
John's one of the best salesmen that you're ever going to be around, and you get to know that person who answers the phone and that person at that front desk. They have a lot more influence than you might imagine that they do. So, again, you really want a job at this place, start showing up. And again, I don't be obnoxious, but you just be there and say hi. You know, is whoever it was that interviewed available? Could I talk with them? You get to know that person at the front desk better, and they'll make sure they open the doors for you. You know what? I don't know if Jim is available, but let me go check. You know what? I think I could get you in there. Great thing to do. In today's world, most jobs don't last for more than, especially an entry-level job, wouldn't last for more than 2 weeks after it's probably first announced. So everything you do in the process is going to have to happen in a couple of weeks, and in some cases shorter than that. I'd say the less sophisticated, the more entry-level a job is, the lesser time that you have to make an impression and find the job. Dress. How should you dress when you show up? There is one adage related to dress, and it won't ever do you wrong, ever. There's a simple one. Question to the room, or please, guys on the internet, guys and gals on the internet, tell me the answer to what your thoughts and the answer to that question. How should you dress? In a way, you're answering it, in my opinion, the right way. Yeah. The right answer is you can never overdress. You can always underdress. So for you, I mean, I wouldn't go in today's world to say as far as a suit and tie, because you can be very formal today. And, you know, the award shows, the Grammys the other night is a good example. Again, those are people making an impression, obviously, on national television and seeing. You don't have to have a suit on or a tie, but you'd better dress the best you personally can dress. You cannot overdress for a job interview, because, again, it may be, and by the way, it may be what's totally inappropriate for what the job is going to be. I mean, the job may be a ditch digger, right? Dress as best you can for that interview. You will not, I can't even imagine a potential employer that would think anything negative of it, and frankly, it would be a huge positive for you. And you know what? That doesn't mean you go out and buy yourself a bunch of expensive clothes. I guarantee you that you all have in your wardrobes something that could be totally appropriate, but it should be the best you have. And guess what? Clean. If it needs to be pressed, which you can still do today, you know, there are dry cleaners. It's not that expensive. Remember, you're trying to get a job that's going to hopefully be something you're in for some time. It'll pay you a lot more than a $10 dry cleaning bill would be. Clean, pressed, all those sorts of things. That may be the only time you ever dress like that for that employer and in that job, but it'll make a huge impression. You know why? Because most people won't do it. Most people will not dress that way. You will stand out, and again, it's not going to be the one factor that gets you a job, but it could be the one that loses you a job, and it could be a tiebreaker, quite honestly, if there's several things that people are considering. So I've been told by my clock watcher that we've got 6 minutes left. So I think it's a good time to sort of wrap up. I'm going to actually switch from my own self here to a slide that it doesn't mean we're done yet. I'm just putting this up here because it's just going to be on the screen for a little bit while we finish up. By the way, thank you all for attending. This is the first of these. Next week's topic is going to actually be on our entity. It's sort of the one that we'll do that'll be a little bit selfish. Even all the people that work with us here, I don't think understand sort of the breadth of what we do. and probably I'll even ask this question. Does anybody in the room now, we've got a whole bunch of people that are our interns and staff in here, do you have any idea how many what we would call primary websites that we have that describe the kinds of things that we do? And Josh, you're excluded. You and John, the two of you are excluded. Don't answer. I guess Elijah, you are too. Anybody else? Do we have 1? Do we have 2? Do we have 10? Do we have 100? How many websites that you could go to that would describe, you know, in the same way a brochure would, let's say. So an online brochure that describe the kinds of different things that are done at Nourish the Planet and CEED. So CEED being the Center for Ecolonomic Excellence and Development. Anybody? I don't know the exact number, by the way. So, but I know I'm in the ballpark with the number I'm going to throw out. It's more than 10. Yes. And it's less than 20. So I'm guessing right now my number would be 15 in that range. John's, what are you thinking, John? So websites that would be considered brochures. So they're not capture pages. They're not the other sorts of things like that. I don't think there's that many. But bottom line, it's still way more than you probably thought. Here's why, and the reason I want to show people, because it'll give you a good example. It'll bring up a lot of questions and so on. So we got about 3 or 4 minutes left. I'm going to be really. Norm said 8 to 10, and he's in the ballpark. Other questions, comments, thoughts? Again, this is not intended. Today and maybe a little bit next week is the only time that I am really ever going to lecture as such. I don't want to do that. And we're going to have outside guests for almost starting 2 weeks from now, and we're going to have outside guests. Please try to give me thoughts of things you'd like to see. People online and here live. Anything. I don't care what it is. You want us to get an expert on whatever is in the sustainable area, what's in the economic area, I'll find them. You pick a topic, we'll get them online here with us. And I don't care where they're at in the world. Now, I'm not talking about individuals. You asked me to get, President Obama, and I'm not going to get President Obama, but a specific topic area. So I heard one. Oz. You want to have the best Earthship person in the country? Jerry Weaver, who's 91 years old, who is the wife of Dennis Weaver, the late Dennis Weaver, lives in probably the most famous Earthship in the United States. And I could easily get Jerry Weaver on. Jerry Weaver would be honored. She'd actually be embarrassed a little bit. But there's absolutely, Oz. Quite honestly, that's a simple one. We can do that real easily. And by the way, I love Oz. Sometimes has a wonderful level of innocence, and I love that. The Earthship movement's a lot bigger than you might think, and it really. It did maybe initiate in New Mexico. They'd kind of like to claim it did. It's been around forever. I mean, Earthships have been built since the first recorded history. So I think we're being a little bit bold here in America and taking credit for that. There's a lot more of the Earthship movement in other countries. The Afghans, they pretty much, that's their whole life is Earthships. they don't call them Earthships, but that's what they are. I mean, Earthship is a structure that's built into the land. It makes use of recycled and reused materials, and it's energy efficient in its approach. That's just generally the description of it. But we absolutely will get someone like that, or multiple people like that. A couple other comments that people put online. Damien said a resume is more important since it allows the ability to get interviews to show the outfit.
To our poll question.
One thing we got to watch is you're getting pretty big feedback when you're talking, so I don't know whether it's what was that one that you said, Elijah?
On the poll, added a poll question.
We added a poll question. Wow, this is cool. So Elijah added a poll question for those that are on here. There's some questions. Here's the question. is an outfit or a resume more important? That's why Damien had already answered that. So the first answer, number 1, would be outfit, and the 2 is resume. So that's why Damien answered that. He was already ahead of us, and he was answering the question. We look forward to seeing you again in a couple weeks or 3 weeks, however long that is. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you later.